On the afternoon of December 2nd, 2020, a deer hunter was making his way through the woods of North Carolina when he saw an abandoned car stuck in a rut. It was a gray Chevy Colorado pickup truck, all decked out with matte black wheels. As the hunter got closer, he saw the bodies of two men, one in the bed of the truck, the other on the ground. Both men had bullet wounds and casings were all over the ground. After the hunter reported his findings, the police arrived at the scene to investigate. The victims were both declared lifeless and identified as Army soldiers. The man in the bed of the truck was 37-year-old William, or Billy Levine II. The man on the ground was 44-year-old Timothy Dumas. Billy took multiple bullets to the chest before being wrapped in a nylon army blanket and placed in the bed of his truck. Under the blanket, Billy was only wearing a pair of short shorts, more commonly referred to as army undies, so it almost seemed like he was sleeping when he was first attacked. Timothy took a bullet to the head, and there didn't seem to be anything notable about his placement or clothing. The weapon wasn't at the scene, and not much evidence was found that suggested who was responsible. So Billy and Timothy were found in the woods near a Fort Bragg training area in North Carolina. In recent years, Fort Bragg was home to many substance-related scandals. No narcotics were recovered from the scene, but detectives theorized that it had something to do with the crime. His best friend's wife said it was out of control. Almost every time I saw Billy, he was strung out on something. Once the police found out about that, they jumped to the conclusion that the crime was a deal gone wrong. Both Billy and Timothy were actually under investigation for smuggling narcotics on Fort Bragg, so the theory checked out. And get this, Billy was an executioner himself, so he had a target on his back for sure. Back in 2018, Billy snuffed his fellow soldier Mark, and he was never charged for the crime. He wasn't even kicked out of the military. So Billy and Mark were absolute besties. Mark suffered a traumatic brain injury from a detonator accidentally going off, so he had to work a desk job at Fort Bragg. In mid-March, Mark went to Disney World in Florida with his wife and daughter. Billy tagged along. On the car ride home to North Carolina, Mark apparently started acting a little crazy. Billy said his bestie thought they were being followed and listened to, but Mark's wife said he seemed fine when she talked to him that day. I'm not sure who to believe, the bestie or the wifey. Well, the men pulled up to Billy's house on the afternoon of March 21st. Mark started working on his car in the driveway, taking out his battery or something. One thing led to another, and all of a sudden, Mark and Billy were shouting at each other. About what? We don't know. When their words weren't enough, the fight got physical. Sometime during the wrestling match, Billy went inside and locked the door. In the home was Mark's daughter. She said that she was scared by her Uncle Billy, so she unlocked the door for her dad, Mark, to come inside. When she opened the door, she saw her daddy was mad and walking towards Uncle Billy. Uncle Billy came around and fired a bullet at her dad. She acted out her dad falling to the ground. I looked at my daddy's face and I knew he was gone. Wow. It's already tragic for your dad to be viciously slain, but I can imagine how awful that has to be for that to happen when you're a kid and to witness the whole thing. It's not clear who called 911, but the police were notified of the incident and immediately rushed to the home where they found Mark lying face down with 3 bullet wounds from a .45 caliber firearm. When Billy was questioned about the incident, he said Mark went after him with a screwdriver. But a screwdriver wasn't recovered from the scene, and Billy never said anything about moving it. The president of the International Association of Forensic Criminologists reviewed the case details and said, the shooter's own words bury his ass because there is no screwdriver. Did it disappear or melt? Someone's tampered with the crime scene or he's lying. He said it, not me. Later on in his interview, Billy reported Mark was acting crazy and he was nervous because he couldn't see his hands. But wait, didn't Billy just say Mark attacked him with a screwdriver? Something isn't adding up here. So here's where things get super suspicious for the Army. In the memorandum about Mark's demise, the Special Forces Command first claimed Mark took his own life. They later changed the report to say he passed away in the line of duty. In the line of duty? More like in his own home off duty. The sheriff's office ruled the incident a justifiable homicide, which means they believed Billy acted out of self-defense. And just like that, Billy was picked up from the station and sent right back to work. He was never charged for the crime and wasn't subjected to a toxicology report either. A police detective in the area said the Delta Force is a very hush-hush community. They do what they want. Yeah, it seems like it. But that wasn't the last time Billy found himself in a run-in with the law. In February of 2019, he was charged with a felony for harboring an escapee. His court date was set for March of that year, but sometime before then, Billy's charges and court dates literally vanished from the records. Other than the screenshots some people took of the case details before they were deleted, there is no trace of this ever happening. Okay, this is just weird. I don't know what is going on, but I do not like it. So now back to Billy and Timothy's case. If Billy has that shady of a history, I'm sure a handful of people had reason to want him gone. Timothy's history is more secretive, but it's possible he was into some sketchy business too. Even still, I don't think any issue is worth the men losing their lives. As of now, no public statements have been made about the suspect, if the authorities even have one right now. But sadly, this is just one of many homicides that have taken place at Fort Bragg. Holly and John Wemmick were both in the military when they fell in love and got married. Holly was an Army nurse stationed at Fort Bragg. John was a Marine stationed 2.5 hours away in Camp Lejeune. After John came back from 7 months on a ship in the Persian Gulf, he started to physically abuse his wife. One July day in 2008, Holly didn't show up for her shift at the Wemmick Army Medical Center, which worried her coworkers. The previous night, Holly called one of her friends, April, and left a voicemail. April had just gotten off from a 12-hour shift, so she went straight to sleep without calling Holly back. The next morning, April woke up to a bunch of missed phone calls. She called the number back, and the person on the other end of the line said, "Is Holly with you at your apartment?" April got a sinking feeling and decided to stop by Holly's apartment with some of Holly's other friends and coworkers. There, the group noticed the smell of gasoline and smoke. They peered into the windows and found remnants of a fire, but no Holly. When police officers were called out to investigate, they noticed blades were missing from the kitchen and a chunk of carpet had been cut out. Oh no, missing carpet is never a good sign. They determined the fire was set intentionally. And with Holly still nowhere to be found, a missing persons report was filed and a search began. That summer, there had been 2 other missing female soldiers at Fort Bragg, so it was theorized that they were all connected. On June 21st, guests at a nearby motel filed several complaints about a rank smell coming from one of the rooms. In that room, one of the missing women, Megan Tuma, was found lifeless in the bathtub. Officials said she had been there for days and no one suspected anything because a do not disturb sign was on her door. Megan had also just arrived at Fort Bragg 2 weeks earlier, so no one really knew her to notice she was missing. To make matters worse, Megan was 7 months pregnant at the time. Gosh, that really takes a sick person to do something so awful to a pregnant woman like that. An unknown person started writing letters to Fayetteville police and newspapers in the style of the Zodiac Killer. The writer admitted to slaying Megan and signed a Zodiac-like symbol at the bottom. So when Holly went missing, detectives feared there was a mass executioner on the loose targeting women at Fort Bragg. With that in mind, investigators began interviewing Holly's family and friends to see if they knew anyone that might do this to her. Following protocol, Holly's husband John was questioned first since he was Holly's next of kin. Even though John was stationed at Camp Lejeune, he spent a lot of time going back and forth between him and Holly's places, so they essentially shared the apartment. John said he knew nothing about the incident other than the fact that Holly was missing and their apartment had been set ablaze. Yeah, and the entire world knew all of that too. Come on, John, you have to know more than that. But he assured detectives that that was all he knew. He said, "I don't know where she is. Haven't talked with her. Don't know anything." With that, John was sent home and investigators spoke with other friends and family members to get down to the bottom of Holly and John's relationship. That's when they found out things were extremely complicated between the two. John was known for being extremely rude and aggressive to Holly. Apparently, he didn't like the fact that Holly had a superior ranking. Oh my God. Heaven forbid a woman excels. In addition to the heat Holly got from John, one of John's old girlfriends resurfaced and started harassing Holly too. Things got so bad, Holly filed for a restraining order where she wrote, "I have changed my phone number 6 times. She has had individuals contact my friends looking for me. This has been going on for 8 months." Wow, that is so bad. Obviously, when detectives found all of that out, they suspected the ex-girlfriend for being involved in Holly's disappearance. The ex was questioned by the police, and she said she had nothing to do with Holly's disappearance. She was shocked to hear the news and was probably freaking out because she looked super suspicious by harassing poor Holly for several months. But despite the suspicion, the ex's alibi checked out and investigators were already looking into another hot lead. Some people from Holly's building reported seeing a male figure running with a bag, getting into a black truck, and driving off. And the more of Holly's friends detectives interviewed, the more they theorized John was responsible. One of Holly's friends recalled a time when Holly told her about a terrifying incident with John. Holly said John showed her a bullet that he carved her name into. He said, "This is your bullet, and this is my bullet." After that, John held up a firearm to his head like he was going to pull the trigger. He also aimed it at her like he was going to knock her out. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot? Oh, that phrase I use is the military way of saying WTF. You should try it sometime. It's pretty fun to say. Anyway, after the scary incident, Holly decided enough was enough. She sent her 2 kids from a previous relationship to live with their biological father and looked into getting a restraining order against John and divorcing him. Run and never look back. Holly was granted a temporary restraining order in May. When the order was up in 10 days, she was supposed to appear in court for the official restraining order. Holly never showed up in court that day, so her case was dismissed. Throughout it all, John remained a top suspect. A few other people's names were tossed in the hat too, including John's buddy and fellow Marine Kyle. A few Marines from the base reported hearing Kyle asking if he could borrow a truck from someone on July 9th. He said he needed it to help a friend move some things that would not fit in a car. Kyle was brought in for questioning, and he said that friend was John, but alleged John called off their meeting, so Kyle hung out with his wife instead. Unknown to Kyle, investigators had already spoken with his wife, and she said that story wasn't true. So Kyle changed his story and admitted helping John, but said he only moved a few things from John and Holly's apartment before he left for the night. Well, not long after that, Holly's body was discovered buried in a shallow grave of a rural area right by Camp Lejeune. Holly's body had been dismembered and burnt, and there were a few blades found nearby. Those blades were an exact match to the ones missing from Holly's set at home. Once Kyle found out about the discovery, he came to his senses and confessed. He told the cops that John called him and asked for help moving things in Fayetteville. Kyle said John was his military brother and he'd do anything for him. He had his 6. That's back. But when Kyle arrived and John told him he'd snuffed Holly and needed help disposing of the body, he was all like, oh, what did I get myself into? Instead of saying no and calling the cops, Kyle helped, making him an accessory to the crime, which is exactly what he was charged for. John was charged for first-degree homicide. The stories of Billy, Timothy, Mark, Holly, and Megan are just a few of the many deaths that have occurred at Fort Bragg. In 2020 alone, at least 44 soldiers have passed away at Fort Bragg, 21 of which were self-inflicted acts. Most of those were substance-related too. And one of the most concerning elements of this topic is the fact that the special forces keep these cases extremely secretive and even try to cover them up. In January 2020, a 19-year-old soldier was found in his bunk, and his body was already in an advanced state of decomposition. In May, a 21-year-old was decapitated on a camping trip with 6 of his fellow paratroopers. No arrests were made. And in December of that year, just 3 weeks after Billy and Timothy's case, a 31-year-old Army medic fired bullets at his pregnant wife. So something bad is clearly happening at Fort Bragg, and no one is trying to address the situation. While yes, a lot of these individuals were involved in illegal acts or aggressive partners, it's all extremely shady how they all happen to people at Fort Bragg. And it's even more shady that military officials are trying to cover it up. See you next time on Killer Bites.